Russia stands a real chance of cracking. And of course, you've only got to look at the impact of the oil price. The drop to $50 a barrel. Well, the Russian budget is predicated on a price of around $70 a barrel. This is going to put real stresses and strains on the Russian economy, as indeed the Russians have admitted. And that, taken together with other factors such as the loss of manpower, the fact that they're running fast out of vehicles. The International Institute for the Study of War reckons that the other day that Russia's got about a year's supply of armored vehicles, and most of those are old Soviet stock, T-55s, BMP-1s, and the like. Dictatorships are brittle. It was overreach that caused the cracking and the breakup of the Soviet Union, and it could well be the same for Russia.
Is there anything that Europe could do now to bolster Ukraine's air defences?
Yes, it absolutely could. It should implement the Sky Shield initiative, under which it would see some 140 aircraft from Europe based outside Ukraine, establishing an integrated air protection zone over West Ukraine, and being ready to shoot down Russian drones and Russian ballistic missiles. And that would send a very strong signal to Putin. It would also be a real example of proper support for Ukraine. And frankly, every time an outrage such as happened in Sumy the other night it takes place, there is an enormous amount of hand-wringing and talk. And we come back to my earlier point. Until and unless the West, Russia, Europe, Canada, and America understand and recognize that the only way Russia is going to stop this behavior is if it is defeated on the battlefield. And that means a clear announcement by Europe that is the intent. And the intent must be to give Ukraine the means to defeat Russia on the battlefield. And that means not only equipment and ammunition in large quantities. It means support with training and with organization and the whole 9 yards. But it also means real sacrifices from European countries, because we will have to dig really deep in order for that to happen. But we can do so. The combined European GDP is 4 times that of Russia. With sacrifice and with energy and with leadership, we could absolutely do that. And we could force the Russians to recognize that they will never achieve their aims in Ukraine, and recognize that they've got to stop.
And the Americans certainly do seem worried about an expansion of this conflict, though. It's part of the reason, at least they say it's part of the reason, that they really don't want to become involved. They don't want boots on the ground in this situation. France and Britain, who would presumably have to lead any effort like that, are also nuclear powers as well as Russia. Is there not a risk of the conflict expanding, or have we kind of got past that now?
There is a real risk of the conflict expanding if Russia isn't stopped. And I keep coming back to this point, that the only way you stop Russia is to defeat them on the battlefield. Russia only respects strength. Where Russia sees weakness, Russia will continue to probe, to push, to chance its arm, as it is doing at the moment. And that raises real risks of the conflict expanding. If Russia is seen to get away with a ceasefire that favors Russia, all that is going to happen is that Putin will rebuild his armed forces, retrain his armed forces, re-equip his armed forces, and at some stage in the future, he will have another go at completing the work in Ukraine. Inevitable, absolutely inevitable, because Russia cannot countenance Ukraine as a separate, independent, sovereign state. Russia cannot see itself as a proper country unless it is an empire which includes Ukraine. So they'll try again. The way to stop that is strength. The way to stop that is to hammer Russia. The way to stop it is to support Ukraine defeating Russia. And that's the way we prevent wider conflict. And we also have to recognize that there will never be transatlantic peace, European peace and security, unless and until what I've said about defeating Russia happens, and Ukraine is included in the NATO alliance as a NATO member, and the NATO alliance puts together a band of deterrent steel from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea to make sure that there can be no resurgence of Russia.
Well, on the battlefield and on the front, the Institute for the Study of War is reporting that daily advances by Russia, in eastern Ukraine at least, have significantly slowed. Can Putin keep throwing manpower at the problems he faces in eastern Ukraine?
You're absolutely right. And this, in a sense, gives the lie to the all too frequently voiced Western assumption that somehow Russia is invincible and can never be stopped. Russia can be stopped. Russia is being stopped. And even if Russia has advanced, it has advanced in minuscule amounts for the last year and a half, as you say, at vast cost to itself. I mean, by the 9th of May next month, when Putin will be no doubt standing up in the Red Square in Moscow to mark Victory Day, which the Russians do every year, the Russians on the current trajectory of casualties will have lost about 1 million men killed and wounded in Ukraine. How long can it keep it up for? I don't know the answer to that. But what I do know is that there will come a breaking point for Russia at some stage in the future. Probably give it a year and a half. And if Ukraine can hang on, and if we can help Ukraine can hang on, and not just hang on, but also inflict decisive victories over Russia, then I think Russia stands a real chance of cracking. And of course, you've only got to look at the impact of the oil price. The drop to $50 a barrel. Well, the Russian budget is predicated on a price of around $70 a barrel. This is going to put real stresses and strains on the Russian economy, as indeed the Russians have admitted. And that, taken together with other factors such as the loss of manpower, the fact that they're running fast out of vehicles. The International Institute for the Study of War reckons that the other day that Russia's got about a year's supply of armored vehicles, and most of those are old Soviet stock, T-55s, BMP-1s, and the like. Dictatorships are brittle. It was overreach that caused the cracking and the breakup of the Soviet Union, and it could well be the same for Russia if Ukraine is properly supported.
Russia certainly seems to believe it can keep progressing. I mean, General Syrskyi, head of Ukraine's armed forces, of course, warns that Russia is beginning a new offensive now around Kharkiv and Sumy. We saw after the Kursk pocket was closed effectively by the Russians that the Ukrainians were able to halt further Russian advances using things like HIMARS strikes. What is there that Ukraine's allies could supply now as this Russian offensive begins that could halt any further significant Russian advances?
Well, more of the same, Louis. It's more equipment, more 155 millimeter ammunition, more Storm Shadows. Germany could be sending its Taurus missiles. France has something equivalent as well. So we've got to continue to dig deep and dig even deeper to help Ukraine.
And is it encouraging that some European nations, I'm thinking of especially of Germany, have shifted slightly and are now putting more effort into supporting Ukraine?
I think absolutely, and I think what Friedrich Merz announced the other day, the so-called lifting of the debt brake on Germany, potentially is a total game changer, because Germany could well become the big defense spender in Europe. Now, that, of course, is going to take time to play out, to go through. But we should be really encouraged by that. We should be encouraged by the innovative ideas being put out for financing defense and rearmament. The rearmament, the European Rearmament Bank, the European Defense Bank, ideas which I think have great merit. The proposal to set up an 800 million euro defense rearmament fund by Ursula von der Leyen. All these are good ideas, but they've got to be carried through. It's one thing to talk. What we've got to see is proper action. And there's been two. It's always the same. We live in the real world. I get that, and there is will and there is determination, but it's what is required is this single-minded focus on achieving the aim and making it happen.
You've been watching Frontline for Times Radio with me, Louis Sykes. If you'd like to be the first to get exclusive content, you can sign up for membership with the link below. You can also listen to Times Radio for the latest news and analysis, or read it on thetimes.com. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.